Hello, everyone. You are listening to the C Squared podcast with Corey and Curtis. Today, we are on our own, no guest. So sorry, you got to put up with just us. But we're going to be talking about effective ways to market your band, different tricks and tips and things that you can do to reach more people that don't necessarily have to cost any money at all,
Mhm.
depending on how you execute these different strategies. So, yeah, Curtis, let's take
Um,
this. We want to start.
yeah, sure. Okay, so first things first is I think one of the problems is a lot of people misunderstand what marketing kind of is.
Mhm.
A lot of people confuse it with sales, which it isn't the same thing at all. They do overlap at times, but they're not necessarily the same. Um, well, let me ask you this: what do you consider to be marketing before I give kind of over what mine is? Because your day job is marketing, so I want to hear what your opinion is first.
So the difference between marketing and sales is like honestly, it's the end goal. So marketing is the goal is usually to reach more people. It's things like raising brand awareness, creating buzz around the brand, telling the brand story, and using those kind of techniques to build an emotional investment
Yeah.
into the brand, building a community around the brand. And when I say brand, brand can also mean band because your band is your brand at the end of the day. So that's kind of where marketing is, whereas sales, you're just trying to talk somebody into buying stuff. So,
Yeah, but they do
but they
cross.
do overlap.
Yeah,
So you often need to market your band or brand or whatever in order to make the sales in an effective way, because creating that emotional investment into your brand will create long time repeat customers.
let
So
me
it
ask.
all works together.
Okay, let me ask you this: do you consider, some people don't consider this to be, but do you consider advertising to be part of marketing?
I consider advertising to be part of sales,
Okay,
but it also
fair,
depends on what the call to action is.
fair.
If the call to action is something like subscribe now or learn
Yeah.
more, or you're directing somebody to be more involved with your band, then it's marketing. If you're directing somebody to your merch store to buy something, then it's sales. So
Okay.
it really depends on the goal.
Okay. So you're saying that the end goal of selling would be, or getting people to buy would be advertising, but the end goal of marketing is not necessarily.
So advertising is its own thing and it will
Okay.
fall either under the umbrella of sales or marketing, and it's
Yep.
dependent on the call to action. So if
Okay.
the call to action is something like subscribe now on a YouTube ad, that's marketing. If
Okay.
it's something like buy now, pre-order now, or visit our merch store, something like that, then that's sales. So they are both a type of advertising, but they fall under two different umbrellas.
I do like that definition. Okay. So now, before a band starts doing any type of marketing or sales or anything like that, I think the very first thing that they need is that they need to have something that they can market, because a lot of bands will start doing something without any type of product, if you get what I mean. And I
Yeah.
think it could be like, even if you just have merch, I think is better, like, is fine. Some bands, because some bands don't actually, some bands will just start with the merch and only do like live shows, which is totally fine in my opinion. But what would you say personally would be the very first thing a band would need minimally before doing anything like marketing?
Honestly, they need to have their whole digital profile set up. So they need to
Mhm.
have, well, obviously they need to have their music done and
Mhm.
it needs to be on point.
Yeah.
They need to have their website set up. They need to have all their socials set up. Marketing, advertising, all that stuff should be the last step in the whole process. We kind of touched on this in the challenge a little bit with ad buying specifically, but really it comes to all of it, because if you don't have it all set up, what are you marketing? You're going to start throwing, advertising or whatever out there, and people aren't going to respond to it because they're not going to get a full picture of who you are and what you do, and you're not going to have that robust presence that you need to make it really really effective. So it should be the last step in what you're doing.
Well, what about though? What if you had a band that was just a live band and they didn't do anything like that? Like, there are bands that sometimes do that. It's very rare, but it does happen. You know what I'm
Honestly,
saying?
if you're not going to have like your socials set up and everything, how are you even attracting people to your live performances?
Good
There's
point.
really no such thing as a live only band
Yeah, yeah,
anymore because you need that digital presence in order to grow.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So they get all their social media set up. But,
Let
hmm?
me rephrase that. Unless they just want to be in their live local scene and never really grow beyond that, then that's a whole other thing. And then that's like word of mouth marketing and flyers and stuff like that. That's all based on what you do on the streets. But if you want to grow beyond that, you have to have your digital platforms all set up.
I agree. Actually, before I get into the next question, let's go back a little bit. So digital platform setup, define that. Do you just mean the social mediums, or do you mean like the web shop, or what do you mean?
At least a website. So a lot of people are like, they don't really understand the difference between a web shop and a website, and really they should be just the same freaking thing. But
Mhm.
something that has your bio, some images, where people can see you, where people can find you, just one hub that has all of your information. And it doesn't have to be difficult. Wix is super easy. So setting all that up, have your Bandcamp set up, have um, your social media set up. And I know a lot of people aren't fans of Bandcamp, but at least have the option to purchase digital stuff on Bandcamp. You don't have to have merch on there. You don't have to have physical CDs or anything like that on there, but just have it available as a, secondary or tertiary form of income revenue. So just when people find you, they can buy a digital copy of your album. So at least have all of that set up.
Okay, so now what would you say would be the best thing for the band to do? They should have all the socials set up then, or just one or two?
I would say have them all set up. It really isn't that hard to
Yeah.
set up a social media platform. Just go in and sign up, claim your username. Even if you
Mhm.
aren't super active and all you're doing is cross posting, like say, I know a lot of people push back on Twitter.
Yeah.
So at least set it up and cross post everything that you're putting on Instagram and Facebook, cross post it to Twitter. It's really not that difficult.
When you say cross post, you mean like do the exact same link, right?
Yeah, that's just what cross posting is. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with cross posting.
Let's talk about this for a second, because there's a lot of people that say that there is something wrong with cross posting. So can you kind of go into that a little bit? Because there are people that actually say don't cross post, and I want to hear from a marketer why that's not a big deal.
It's not a problem. I mean, if you have the exact same audience across every channel, then it's a
Yeah.
problem because it gets
Yeah.
redundant. But so few people have the exact same audience across all platforms. So
Agreed.
you're reaching a new subset of people. Obviously, you're going to have to tweak it depending on what the platform is.
Yeah.
Because, like Instagram, you can write a novel in your caption,
Yeah.
but Twitter, you're very, very limited. So you're going to want to be very concise and very precise with what you're
Yeah.
saying. So obviously, tweak it depending on your whatever platform it is. But with each post, you're going to reach a new portion of your audience.
Agreed.
So, I mean, there are things where it's like I follow a band on all three platforms, but for some reason, the algorithm only shows me that post on Twitter or that
Yeah.
post on Instagram.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand why anybody would be like, oh, never cross post. That's bad. It's
I agree.
really not.
I agree.
You can still post things with like, especially on Twitter where it's all about volume. You can
Yeah.
still post things that are unique to that um, to that platform.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to all be cross posting. You can still do both. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with posting more than once a day either.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that is a key point about the algorithm, because you're right. Because a lot of times people will post something on Facebook. What is it? 5% of all people actually see the posts or something like that. Do you remember what it is? I can't remember, but it's like a
It's a
low,
small
low.
number.
Yeah, it's like a low portion. I don't know what the percentage is on Instagram, but I think it's a little bit higher. And then with Twitter, it'll just like fucking leave like so fast. Um,
Exactly.
so how many times do you think someone could post something within a week that's similar content without getting the algorithm fucked?
Oof. Honestly, I would tweak it each time. so that it's a bit different. So you're not doing the exact same thing. Word it differently, do a different image. It can be similar content. Like say you want to promote your Spotify or something like that.
Yep.
So one day you post a link to your Spotify. One day you post a link to a playlist that you made on your Spotify.
Fair.
Like you can vary it up
Yep.
while still keeping the content in the similar, vein.
Okay, that's a good point. So, okay, so now just off of social media for a second here. So, do you think that there's any other platforms a band can be using to market themselves digitally other than social media nowadays?
Oh, yeah, email marketing. You should be
Okay,
building an email list.
let's wait on email for a second because I wanted to take that up separately, but I was wanting to go into more like whatchamacallit, video and YouTube, which is kind of social, I guess, but huh?
That all falls under social media. So when
Yeah.
I say have all of your socials set up, that includes YouTube.
Okay,
You
cool.
could have a band YouTube. I don't understand why bands they don't set one up and they just have it going through like one of the members' YouTubes. No, you
Yeah,
need to have a band YouTube set up.
I agree. So I wanted to talk about that for just one second, if you know. I'm assuming you know. So with YouTube, how often can you post to YouTube without it being a problem?
Like
But
twice a week,
once a
2
week?
or 3
Okay.
times a week is
Okay.
when it starts to get throttled.
Okay.
I don't know any bands that are going to be putting like 3 music videos a week out or
No,
something like that.
no, but I have heard an objection to doing one more than one a month. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, you can get away with doing more than one a month. I don't know any bands that actually would do more than
There.
one a month.
Yeah. No.
But if like say you're creating other content, say you're a band that does um like that you're here's one. The band Ravens Cry.
Mhm.
They do like a weekly interview with other bands where they just,
Mhm.
chat about music and things like that. So that's another kind of content that you can upload like once a week just to keep your channel active.
Yep.
So if you're branching into other content, you can have more than once a month.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know any other bands that are like putting out a music video a week. That would be insane. That'd be cool.
No, but
Insane.
like some bands do like behind the scenes type stuff, podcast interviews, that type of thing, right? So like that's why.
Like maybe twice a week, but once a week is good if you have other content that you can create.
Okay, cool. And then what do you think is too much content on social media out of curiosity? I have differing opinions on this, but I want to hear yours.
Depends on the platform.
Okay.
So Facebook, keep it to about once a day. Instagram, don't go more than 3 times a day. Twitter, minimum of 15 times a day.
Minimum,
And
yeah.
YouTube once a week, maybe twice a week. So it really depends on the platform.
Yeah.
Before that's when the algorithm starts throttling you.
Well, but at the same time, would it not, like if the person was getting interaction, it wouldn't matter, would it?
No, it would, because
Oh,
Facebook it'll start pulling all of that back and not showing your stuff to
even
everybody.
like
Even
interaction. Okay. Well, the
you
reason
start
why I asked,
seeing interactions slip the more you do it.
because the reason why I asked this question, and like maybe, and I'm not trying to throw you off or anything like that, but I had seen something at one point that the biggest websites in the world that like who are number one on Facebook, they post like 5 to 10 times a day. I don't know if that's true or not, but I had seen that somewhere. You don't know?
Honestly, look at some of the biggest publications, like
Yeah.
biggest music metal publications.
Yeah.
Their followings are huge, but look at their interaction from
Okay.
posting that many times a day. It
Fair
may
enough.
look like a lot, but when you look at the percentage
Yeah.
of the audience that's actually interacting with their content, it's really small.
Okay. Cool. Well, I was just curious because I'd seen that before, so I wanted to know what your take was on that. Okay, so then for Facebook, you're saying best practice is to post once per day, Instagram once per day, and Twitter a minimum of 15 times per day. So how?
It's not necessarily posts for Twitter. That's things like, you can post retweeting, commenting, that kind of a thing, because it all counts as a tweet.
Yeah. So now, what about for Facebook? Like, how about for like, is there any way that you can like boost yourself up in the algorithm nowadays, or is it just kind of basically fucked?
So it is kind of just fucked. Facebook is really coming down hard
Yeah.
on viz and stuff like that. So really just making sure that your content is really high quality. Um, and test what your audience engages with. So if you have a particular type of post that your audience really likes to see, so
Yeah.
say they don't respond to a post unless there is a picture of the band involved somewhere,
Yeah.
then make sure that you're posting somehow some sort of visual of the band with all of your posts to keep that engagement up. If they just watch what they're engaging with, and you can
Mm.
keep your engagement rate up.
What about the asking of questions? I know that I accidentally, I didn't even mean,
Questions.
huh? It does? Okay. Because like last week,
Questions that help.
okay, because last week, for example, I did a poll about our podcast and the reach went up 10,000% or something like that. Ridiculous, which I wasn't even expecting. Is there certain types of questions that can help boost you in the algorithm that you're aware of, or is it just kind of,
People like to talk about themselves. So
Okay.
asking people like, what's your favorite track on our new album? Or how did you discover our music? That kind of stuff. People really love to talk about themselves.
Mhm.
So, or asking people, here's one,
What's up?
record yourself, say, have either your guitar player or something like that, record themselves doing 2 different riffs. Ask people which one they prefer.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Make people feel like they're part of your creative process, rather than just posting a video that's like oh, guitar player working on new music. No, do 2 different riffs. You don't actually even have to take their suggestions, just even ask what one they prefer, because then that creates that emotional investment in oh, I was part of the creative process, and then when
Yeah.
they listen to the album, they're going to be listening for the riff that they like the most.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a very good point. Okay, so now let's move on to email marketing for a brief minute here. So one question I always get is, does email marketing actually still work? Because people will talk about spam. So I want to hear your viewpoint on this.
Email marketing does still work as long as you're on point with what you're saying. If you have good subject lines, if you have good content within the email, clear call to action, that kind of a thing, it still works. It still has one of the highest ROIs of any form of marketing if it's done right. Too many people just throw shit out there with no real thought and no real effort into what it looks like, what it sounds like, how it's written, what the
Yep.
content is, and there's no real clear call to action of what you want people to do with this email, that will get you that whole, oh, this is just spam kind of treatment. So you just have to make sure what you're saying is really clear, what you want people to do is really clear, your visuals are on point, so your email is laid out nicely, you've got a nice image, your logo's involved, that kind of a thing. So just put it together really, really well into a nice package and a good solid subject line that is clear and also concise, because that's one thing that I see is people do these big long subject lines and you can
Yeah.
only see the first 4 words. Don't do that.
Well, what would be an example that you could give of something that would be a good type of headline to get people to open?
Anything that creates that fear of missing out. So don't
Okay.
necessarily tell people exactly what is in the email
Okay.
in the subject line. So it'd be something like, have you heard this? Or did you know this? Can you believe this? Guess what's coming? Or say you need
Coming.
like
That really worked, really? That's hilarious.
here's another one. If you want to do like a survey of your fans,
Yeah.
we need your help.
Okay. Okay.
We need your help. And
Okay.
voila.
Okay. So now what would you describe as being a call to action then that would work?
So that's like having a learn more, subscribe now, pre-order now, shop now, buy now, those kind of things in a button format that stands out.
Okay. So, but for example, like let's say a band's trying to get sales.
Mhm.
So what would be,
shop now, buy now.
Okay, so, do you think that do you think it really matters, like all the stuff that a lot of people go into, like with the color of the button and all the rest of that? Because I've seen lots of marketers start going off about button colors, testing, all the rest of that.
I do think the color needs to be bold. So it needs to be
Okay.
something that stands out a lot. It doesn't necessarily have to be red or blue or yellow or something like
Yeah.
that, but something that has a lot of contrast from the background
Okay.
and it is very clear this is where people need to click.
Yeah, I think that's one key point is that you got to say click at this point or buy here or something like that. Otherwise, it doesn't really seem to work.
That's why I say to use a button instead of like hyperlinked text. Because I've seen people do hyperlinked text where the text is bold, but having that color around the words and everything that in the form of the button, it really
Yeah.
draws the eye in and tells
Yeah.
people this is where you need to be.
Good point. Good point. Didn't even think of that, but that's a very good point. And then for frequency of email, what's the least that you should do per month? Just one or?
I would say one per month is the least you should do. The
Okay.
most, probably one a week.
Okay.
Anything more than one a week, you're going to start seeing mass unsubscribes.
Okay. So let's say what would you say would be a good open rate or click-through rate? Open through and click-through rate rather.
So, an open rate above like 12%
Yeah.
is okay. It really depends on your audience and
Yeah.
how they behave. But when it comes to marketing and like retail type emails, I know that I mean, not a lot of people consider this retail, but
It
like
is.
12% is kind of the lowest you want to go. I wouldn't say anything below. I want to keep your list at above 20%. So if people aren't opening your emails, start just nixing them. Unsubscribe them. You can send like one last email that says if you still want to be part of our email list, click here to stay subscribed. Otherwise, we're going to unsubscribe you so you can give them one final chance to interact. But if they still don't, cut them loose because they're just dragging your numbers down.
I have a question because I've never heard that before. So why? So what would be the point of cutting them off the list? Just because it's clicking down your like taking down your open rate is what you mean?
It's taking down your metrics, but
Oh,
also
I
most
see.
email providers, they charge you depending on how big your list is. So
100%.
call the list. If you've
I
got a
see.
bunch of people that aren't opening it, there's no
Yeah.
value in paying for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So get rid of them.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't heard that to call the list for. I've heard it in retail, but I never heard it for a band. That's why I was curious about.
I mean, it's all the same principles. It's just a different audience.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Okay, so let's say that you're not getting very good click-throughs. What would you say would be the first thing to look for to handle that? Like what would be like if you're not getting any click-throughs?
So the first thing would be, what does your call to action look like? Where is it
Good.
positioned in the email? Is it at the bottom? People aren't
Yep.
going to scroll all the way down, move it up.
Yep.
Is it in a bold color or is it hyperlinked text? Is the button too small? Like, look at what your call to action specifically is. So if it's too far down, if it's too small, if it's just like a black button, try changing it to a bolder color, something like that. And I try to keep my call to action, at least the main one. It's called above the fold. It's an old newspaper term,
Yep.
but
I know.
basically put it above where the screen cuts off before you have to scroll.
Nice. Okay. So next thing I want to talk about is like, okay, so with Twitter, you were talking about how you have to do at least 15, you should be doing at least 15 times per day. One thing I've noticed as well is the fact that a lot of people don't want to even do that because they figure that they're going to be spamming people and that people are going to get super annoyed by them. But the problem is like nobody really notices your shit due to the algorithm, even on Twitter. So I think personally, you could probably tweet like probably 200 times per day and you wouldn't fuck up the algorithm one bit. Like, what do you think on that?
I mean, yeah, Twitter is all about volume. I
Yeah.
mean, you could do 30 a day and you'd be
Yeah.
fine. obviously don't do 30 a day on Facebook. You will get throttled to hell.
I'm gonna try it now.
Again, go look at some of the big publications that they post every single article that they write on their
Yeah.
socials. Go look at their interaction rate. It's really tiny for their volume, for their following.
This is true because I have to post most of the links that come out for our socials. Like I just have to, because it's one of the things you have to do. And yeah, it does. It's like, doesn't
After
really
number 3, I bet you it plummets.
well, even, I mean, just in general, I mean, most links that people want you to share on Facebook, that you don't really get that much of a reach unless it's like something clickbait. It just doesn't matter what it is. For Twitter, it's a totally different beast, 100%. And
It's
on
all about volume.
Instagram, say that again?
Twitter's all about that volume.
Yeah, like to me personally, like if you're going to be like a PR or a marketer or something like that, if they're going to be sharing links, I think it's smarter to do it on Twitter than on Facebook, if I'm being honest. But I know a lot of people get really upset if you don't share the link on Facebook.
The thing that I have done that actually increases the engagement rate is I remove the link preview and I replace it with an image.
You remove the link, but where do you click the link then? Or do you
So
mean
you leave the link in the text.
Yeah.
And replace the link preview with an image. So you can do something like do a side-by-side of the band and then a screenshot of the article, or do an image of the band with the logo of the publication or something like that. Thank you so-and-so for covering us. Click here to read the interview or the article or whatever, and replace the link preview with an image, and it actually increases the reach.
Interesting. Okay, I'll have to try that at some point. Is it like a noticeable increase generally?
It's really big.
All right. What about if you get people to share the link using the share button? That also increases the reach quite a bit, correct?
It does. And I noticed that more people are more likely to share if it's an image and not a link preview. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's working, but it does when you just remove the link preview and go straight to the image.
Okay, and is that okay? So now, what about doing this type of stuff on Instagram to make sales? I know it's kind of going to sales now. So, like for example, would you suggest switching the link in bio each time you're selling something, or just do a link tree?
Oh, do a link tree. Or honestly, I would prefer, instead of using Linktree, people use Later. I know it's like $29 or $25 a month or something like that for the Schnazzy plan. But it's totally worth it, because then you can directly hyperlink all of your images to whatever it is that you're selling. And that way it's a living shoppable feed.
Explain that, because I've never heard of this before. So it makes it so that way you can click on the picture and it takes you. Is that what you're saying?
You'll click the link in their bio.
Yeah.
And it brings up what looks like an almost identical Instagram feed. So where all of the images, instead of it being like text like Linktree does, where it's the list of buttons, it's an actual feed of the images that are then linked to whatever it is you're selling.
Okay, and that's called Later, right?
Later.
Okay, I'll try to remember to put that in the show notes later. I will put Later in the show notes. Okay, so then
you can use it to schedule out your posts, even on Facebook and Twitter. And I use it in my day job. I use it for metal injection. I use it pretty constantly, and it's probably one of my favorite tools. It also has a Schnazzy hashtag generator where you can put in like hashtag goth rock, and it'll bring up a whole list of related hashtags and the percentage with which they occur with your original hashtag, and you can just go in and check mark them.
Okay, cool. That's pretty neat. Okay, so the next thing I want to cover briefly, so outside of social media and outside of the email marketing, is basically Bandcamp, because I think that's a marketing tool myself. I don't know how you feel about it. Okay, cool. So so when the person's setting up Bandcamp, like, I mean, they need to have the correct headers and everything like that. They need to make sure that, the art's there and it looks good. and that there's a description. What else should they have in there to make it look good from a marketing standpoint, in your opinion?
So Bandcamp, no matter what's always going to look kind of, I don't know, it kind of looks outdated because of how simple and stripped down it is.
Yeah.
But there's a good thing about that level of simplicity
Mhm.
in that it's really easy to shop it. So
Yep.
making sure like your colors are set to what your band colors are. You know, all of your stuff has images, you've got solid descriptions, you've got, you know, your little bio that's in there, that you link to all of your other, you like all your socials and everything like that. Make sure those are all linked in there. I
Yeah.
don't know why or how, like, I see so many bands that it's like they'll just have their Facebook, but I mean, there are often times where I need all of your socials, and that's a great place to just have a hub of where you can find everything about the band. And
I
then
agree.
just make sure that you have all of your music available for purchase, at least digitally.
Yeah, I agree on that. And then what about you're not a huge fan of having the merch up there, right?
I think that the percentage is really high. So unless
Yeah.
you have solid margins on your merch, and if you don't know what margins are, learn about margins before you start selling merch.
Agreed. Yeah.
Or else you're going to end up selling it and losing money.
Mhm.
But unless you have the ability to absorb the 15% fee because you're making enough money on your merch, it's like eh.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
but at least have your music available digitally and a link of where to buy your merch.
Cool. Okay, so now the final topic I want to talk about on this is kind of like the branding, well, not really branding, but bands on promoting themselves, because that is a form of marketing, I think.
Mhm.
So how do I want to explain this? So do you, I want to say my own thing, but I want to hear you first. So do you think it would make sense for a band member to promote themselves as well as the band?
Um, yeah, it depends really on what they're doing. So like
Fair.
if like let's go back to the guitar player. If they want on their own social media to post videos of them playing, to post like, oh, this is a really cool thing you can do, a walkthrough of your gear,
Yeah.
of what you're using, because I don't know a single guitar player that only has one guitar. So just like, these are some of my favorites that I own, or this is my favorite brand, this is my favorite whatever.
Yeah.
That kind of content is really great for each member to do on their own. So you know, the drummer shows what his drum kit looks like because most people will only ever see it from the front.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's they're not gonna really fully grasp what it is that, and I mean, people are curious about that kind of stuff. You can also post more personal things, like these are my dogs,
Yeah.
or whatever, this is my lizard, because sorry,
Yeah.
my vocalist in Akiavel, she has a lizard, so um,
I was gonna
but
say, yeah, your lizard. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
or it has a lizard. um
Okay.
and so it's like things like, this is my favorite food, it's all a type of promoting yourself, but it creates an emotional attachment, emotional engagement there, where it feels like people are more part of your life, and they're then going to be more invested in your music and what you're doing. The more of yourself that you're comfortable with sharing. Like obviously, you don't have to share everything about yourself. Like if you're suffering with some sort of foot fungus, maybe don't post
Yeah.
that. um,
Don't.
but like you can post things like that. And I mean, the gear walkthroughs are super fun for people.
Okay. So, all right. So now, one thing also that I want to mention too is that I think there's a lot of the thing too that bands have to worry about or keep an eye open is the tone of the communication
Mhm.
when they're on social media. Because, for example, there's a lot of bands on Twitter where there's specific members or just the band themselves, where it's a lot of negative bullshit, just like constant. You know what I mean? And I don't personally think, I think the people that they attract when they do that are people that aren't people that are going to be buying stuff from them, and it's just going to create more negativity. Personally, can you go over for a second, just briefly, on the tone of the communication, how that works in marketing, just from a
Yeah,
marketing?
honestly, the constant negativity of some bands, it may work in getting you some engagement from other people who are equally shitty.
Yeah.
But it's not going to do your band any favors in the long
Mhm.
run. Honestly, all it's going to do is make you known for being difficult to be around, difficult
Yeah.
to work with. And the more you have that reputation, the less people are going to want to book you for shows. They're
Yep.
not going to want to work with you. They're not going to want to collab with you. I mean, it's like, I mean, I've seen bands kick members out because they're too freaking negative on Twitter.
Yep.
So
Yep.
just don't, if you don't have anything good to say, just, I don't know, post a picture of pasta or something. Like, just find something that makes you happy and post about it instead of
Well,
finding something that makes you angry or shitty.
well, I don't know necessarily if it always has to be like
It
happy.
doesn't have to always be happy, but it really shouldn't always be shitty.
Yeah, it shouldn't be shitty. But I think you can also take a neutral type tone on a lot of things. And I
Yeah.
think so, like, what's the phrase? Doom scrolling. Don't be doing that, because otherwise you're just going to start posting a bunch of bullshit about various different things, you know. So now, if one last thing we want to go over really quickly here, other than the tone. Oh, I just saw your message. Then I'll wrap up super quickly here. The last now I want to wrap up. Fuck.
Mhm.
How much time you have for
One more.
battery? One more. Okay, good. So last thing I want to cover really quickly then is what type of thing, like how often should you ask someone to buy, do you think? Because I think it should be as frequently as you need to be, but I want to hear your opinion.
Well, there's going to be burnout if you're constantly asking people to buy stuff from you.
Agree. Yeah.
So you need to create a value for your audience that is beyond saying, please buy this from me, please buy this from me, please buy this from me. So doing things like, okay, so Airnox does this where he does his lives where he like talks about his cats and
Yeah.
just stuff like that and doesn't really ask for anything until the end. He's like, hey, just a reminder, got this going on. But, you know, don't constantly ask people to buy stuff from you because they're just going to start tuning you out.
Yeah, but you
Unless you
Yeah.
have something that is short-lived, that is only like, say you have a limited pressing of 50 vinyl or whatever, then yes, remind people because it creates that fear of missing out. But even doing that daily is going to burn people out. I
yeah,
would say give, like, updates on milestones. So if you have a well, okay, let me rephrase this. Doing that daily for an extended period of time.
mhm.
So if like over months you're selling this limited
Mhm.
release, then people are going to be like, yeah, yeah, whatever. If you do it every day for a week or two, then I mean it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But keep it tight when you're doing the daily ask.
Well,
Otherwise,
tight.
you're going to start, or otherwise, you're going to get people emailing you telling you to fuck off, just like what
Well,
happened with one of our clients. So
yeah, but that was one person
that
at
was
this.
one, but it does happen where if you're doing
Yeah.
something constantly every single day, you're asking people to
Yeah.
buy stuff, you're just going to start
Yeah.
like, oh, this guy just wants money from me.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
don't,
it depends. You
yeah,
got to keep it light, and you can't go overboard on the spamming territory. Is basically what you're saying, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, so it all depends. So we're gonna wrap up then because I know your battery's about to die. So 1 second here. So party on, Corey.
Party on, Curtis. You have fun.